Well, it wants
are
Israel destroyed. It wants the destruction of Israel. That is literally
they
what
want
is.
they want the destruction of this racist political entity that carries out genocide and ethnic cleansing, and it has been doing so for 76 years. The very same people who carried out the Nakba, they raped and murdered and expelled people. Most of the people who are in Gaza are refugees.
I now just want to bring in the Professor Mohammad Marandi. He's been on Uncensored before. He's currently in Beirut. Professor, thank you for joining me. First of all, do you mind me asking why you're in Beirut?
When the Israeli regime carried out a major atrocity on the first day of bombing, killing well over 500 people, I decided to come here, and I thought it would be best to be here to help be a voice for the people of Lebanon. And actually, I was in the building where I was staying when the attack occurred on Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the 6 towers, residential towers that were all destroyed, killing hundreds of people. It was about 1,000 meters away. I know that neighborhood well because during my sabbatical in Lebanon in 2011 and 12, I lived pretty close, and I walk there and I drive through there, and the Israelis massacred hundreds of people. And in the West, you don't stress that. I think there were 83 missiles, each 1 ton. And it's unbelievable how immoral the Western elite has become, that they're gloating over this attack. After a year of genocide and Holocaust in Gaza, and now slaughtering people in Beirut day and night. After the attack on Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, hours later, they said they're going to strike 3 other places, and they struck 12 or 13 in southern Beirut. People were terrorized. No one knows how many people have died. And this is, of course, the legacy of Western colonialism and the Israeli regime, an illegitimate regime. There's a paradox here. On the one hand, they are your chosen people. On the other hand, you're a secular Western political order. We don't know what to believe when it comes to the West. On the one hand, the Israelis from Europe and other parts of the region, and far less Semite than Palestinians, they have exceptional rights. They can slaughter people, as they've done in Lebanon before Hezbollah was created. Hezbollah was created as a result of the Israeli regime's occupation of Lebanon and the taking of this very same city that I'm in right now, Beirut. It was created as a result of the occupation. And they drove the Israeli regime out. And the Israeli regime, during the occupation in 1982, they and their allied militias, they slaughtered in a refugee camp pretty close to where I am right now. They slaughtered 4,000 people within 36 hours, up to 4,000 Palestinians and sub-Lebanese. So this genocidal behavior of the Israeli regime began far before Hezbollah was ever created.
Okay, listen, I gave you a long chance there to respond because I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say. And I mean that. Hezbollah, as you know, along with Hamas, they are wedded to the destruction of Israel. And Hezbollah's response to October the 7th was to immediately unleash a lot of rockets at Israel in solidarity with what Hamas had done in Gaza. If you're the Israeli government and you've just been on the receiving end of one of the worst terror attacks of modern times, with 1,200 people killed, with nearly 7,000 more wounded, in an utterly horrific and barbaric series of attacks from up to 3,000 people coming over your border. And then the response in the north of your border is for Hezbollah to unleash a lot of rockets at you and then to carry on doing that for the next calendar year. At what point did you not think that Israel's going to respond? And whether you agree with what they've done or not, the military success, and I'll phrase that exactly as I've just phrased it, the military success of what they have achieved against Hezbollah in the last 10 days by the pager attacks on 3,000 members of Hezbollah, by taking out now the leader of Hezbollah and many other commanders, by taking out the Hamas leader in Lebanon. You cannot dispute the military success. And what I'm curious about with Iran is where is the response? You know, Iran helped create Hezbollah, helped train Hezbollah at the start. Iran has funded Hamas, funded the Houthis. Israel has now, if you look at this purely objectively from the outside, from a military point of view, is having a lot of success against Iran-backed groups. Where is Iran? Why is it not responding? Many people think it's because actually Iran doesn't have either the ability to take on Israel or the desire to.
First of all, I think that you have to keep in mind that from my perspective, the Israeli regime cannot respond legitimately because the regime is illegitimate. Hezbollah wants apartheid and ethno-supremacism to be dismantled. In other words, something that in the West is very impossible to imagine. All human beings in Palestine.
Well, it wants Israel destroyed. It wants the destruction of Israel. That is literally what is.
They want the destruction of this racist political entity that carries out genocide and ethnic cleansing, and it has been doing so for 76 years. The very same people who carried out the Nakba, they raped and murdered and expelled people. Most of the people who are in Gaza are refugees. This is not a legitimate regime.
Okay, but going back to my question, Professor, why is Iran not doing anything? The world is watching, and the world is curious.
Yeah, first of all, Iran will respond, have no doubt about that, and the Israeli regime will be punished. Second of all, Iran will continue to support the axis of resistance. And Israel has not had any military success. The pagers was a terrorist attack. And it was actually an attack on the West, too, because these electronic devices from now on, those things that have been produced in the West or countries that are allied to the West, their supplies chains have been compromised. And the West is doing nothing about it. And I think lots of people are going to have second thoughts about buying any electronic devices from any of these Western countries or countries affiliated to the West. So the Israeli regime is doing no services to the West by carrying out these terror attacks.
It's interesting that you phrase it. It's interesting you phrase it as a terror attack, given that given that Hezbollah is identified by America and many other countries as a terrorist group, and given that it was very specific in its targeting, extraordinarily precise. It is obviously horrific that civilians were killed in the process, but the vast majority of people who were damaged or wounded or killed by the pager attacks were members of Hezbollah, who are, according to America and Israel, a terror group. So that's how they would categorize it. That's not an act of terror. That would be, under the laws of combat, they would say they are taking on combatants, and that's perfectly lawful and legitimate. That is their argument.
Piers, if it was pagers and walkie-talkies or cell phones that were in the United States, I think you'd have American bombers over countries who they would claim were behind it. So let's put aside the hypocrisy.
But just to be clear, you don't think that Israel has any military right to respond to Hezbollah firing rockets at Israel?
Israel does not have an ethno-supremacist regime. Apartheid South Africa had never had the right to exist, and Israel never had the right to exist. The only existence...
So it has no right to defend itself against rocket attacks?
But it has no right to exist when it came into being by displacing people and massacring.
I understand your position on its existence. I'm just telling you, given it does exist, does it have no right to defend itself?
Piers, this is what you fail to comprehend. As long as you have a master race, as long as you have a hierarchy of race, as long as you have one race that considers itself superior to others, there is not going to be any peace. That's just a fact of life. Whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Palestine or whether it's in South Africa, there's not going to be peace. For Iran, the dismantling, and for Hezbollah, the dismantling, or you can call it the destruction, the dismantling of this system has to happen. And this is something that you don't accept, which is fine. You support racism.
No, I don't. No. Hang on. Don't misquote me. Don't misquote me. I don't dispute for a moment that is the intention of Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, all funded by Iran. I have no doubt that Iran would like to see the destruction and removal of Israel. I get all that. I'm just saying that yeah, but hang on. Yeah. I'm just saying that right now it looks like Hamas is losing, Hezbollah is losing, the Houthis are on the run, and their big backer Iran seems to have disappeared. And I'm looking at this thinking, this is odd. Where is their big backer? Where is Iran, who's been sponsoring and funding all this terror? Where are they when the real action starts? And many people think, like I said, it's because Iran either lacks the capability or the will to try and respond to what's happened.
That's what you want people to think.
No, it's what people are saying.
Well, that's
because
what
there's
people
been no response.
Saying, and that is a narrative that you wish to pursue, which is fine. But then you're going to be struck with reality ultimately. Ansarullah is not retreating. The Israeli regime and the Americans have failed in the Red Sea. The Ansarullah survived 7 years of genocidal war backed by the US and your government against their people. They defeated the people who carried out the genocidal war. Do you think a couple of airstrikes from the Israeli regime is going to change anything? They will continue to enforce, as they say, Ansarullah in Yemen, enforce the Genocide Convention. And your governments are the terror organizations. They're the ones that are funding this genocide. They're the ones giving the bombs, the bunker busters to go and bomb homes and civilian towers in Gaza. And whenever they carry it out, the Western media will say Hamas strongholds, terror centers, Hezbollah strongholds. Why? Because they want to justify these terror attacks. No, the terrorists are in London and Washington and Paris and elsewhere. But since you think that somehow you're more civilized and that your countries are better than ours, whatever you do has justification. No, the terrorists are the ones who are supporting the Israeli regime and who have been carrying out terror for a year. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they are the native population that have been brutalized for 76 years, and Hezbollah has been trying to help them. They voluntarily entered this battle last year, Hezbollah, to draw the Israeli army away from Gaza so they would be able to kill less people. They are heroes, contrary to what you say, and your government has been helping the Israeli regime to slaughter. They've been giving them intelligence, political support, financial support, ammunition, and of course the weapons they have to, and most importantly, the intelligence. All of the Five Eyes and Western intelligence and the AWACS that fly and the drones that fly alongside the Mediterranean, both for Gaza and Lebanon, they're helping the Israeli regime carry out its genocide.
Isn't the truth about this that there's a massive geopolitical battle of will going on, where you have Iran, you have Russia, you have China dancing somewhere in the middle, and on the other side you have the West, and there's a jostling for power and position and geography. You see it in Ukraine, you see it now in the Middle East, and that Iran is sitting there in a really interesting position where it's seeing Saudi Arabia nudging ever closer to normalizing relations with Israel. And if that was to happen, after all the other Middle Eastern countries that have done that, it's pretty well game over for Iran's ability to destroy Israel and to destroy this normalization process. That's what Iran is terrified of. And that's why Iran has been so aggressively funding these groups, which I would categorize as terrorist groups. You categorize them as freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. They've been funded and armed by Iran, who right now is looking completely impotent in the eyes of the world. Now, you say they're going to respond. The last time they responded to an assassination, they fired a few hundred rockets that all got taken out by Israel's Iron Dome. It wasn't exactly a show of strength or might. And I'm not saying this to goad Iran into doing anything. I'm just saying it is notable that Iran has done nothing. And it could be that Iran itself right now is feeling very isolated and feels that maybe the net is closing in on itself.
Pierce, you're very inconsistent in what you said. Right now you're saying on the one hand it's Iran, Russia, and sort of China, and now you're saying Iran is completely isolated and afraid. Which one is it? Let's be real here. This is not about geopolitics. That is always a part of everything. But this is about a moral issue. But you cannot comprehend that your governments are morally inferior than others. Your governments are terror states that are supporting.
I've made no comment about that. I mean, I was the editor.
You were saying that
I was the editor of the Daily. Well, to be clear, I was editor of the Daily Mirror newspaper when we opposed the British government's war in Iraq, for example. Right. So when it comes to my moral view of these things, it may not be as simple as you think.
I acknowledge that in our first discussion, and I will not refrain from doing so again. But your government carried out the dirty war in Syria. We know Jake Sullivan, he wrote an email to Hillary Clinton on February the 12th, 2012, that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria, a decade after 9/11.
What about what Hezbollah did in Syria at the behest of Assad, a dictator? What about killing hundreds of thousands of Muslims? Did you have a problem with that?
No, your governments killed hundreds of thousands of people because your government...
Hezbollah did too, with Assad's forces.
No, your government...
No, you don't think that's true?
Dirty war.
You don't think it's true?
Come on, Piers.
Come on.
Your government...
Are you denying that Hezbollah got into bed with Assad and killed hundreds of thousands of people?
You don't want me to respond because you know that this is going to be a problematic for you. Your intelligence agency in England facilitated the travel of young people to Syria to fight and to join ISIS. The same ISIS that, according to the US Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012, regional countries were deciding to create a Salafist entity between Syria and Iraq. And according to General Michael Flynn in an interview on Al Jazeera of all places, he said that the United States supported this. The United States supported the rise of ISIS and carrying a leaked audio, and all of this is online. He said we allowed ISIS to advance on Damascus. So your governments are responsible for Syria. Your governments are responsible for Libya. Remember, we came, we saw, he died. This was a sovereign country that your government destroyed. Your government supported the genocide in Yemen, and now your government is supporting the genocide in Gaza. And the people of this region...
Would you categorize... Okay, I hear you, and you're perfectly entitled to your view. But would you agree that when you have a charter which proclaims you want the destruction of Israel, which has 7 million people living in it, that is genocide?
No, no one is talking about killing Jews. That's a lie. In fact, many
Well, if you destroy Israel, you destroy millions of Jewish people.
And fortunately, the resistance in Southern Africa and their supporters across the world destroyed the apartheid regime in South Africa, but they didn't kill off the white population. Young Jews in the United States are standing up to this apartheid and racist and genocidal regime today. And the fact is that the Israeli regime has exposed itself to the world. They have done more harm to Jews than anyone else. They're the anti-Semites because they're carrying out this genocide in the name of Jews, and young Jews in your country and in the United States are saying, not in my name. So they're the anti-Semites. They're the Europeans who came here, and now Netanyahu calls Palestinians Amalek. And you know what that means in biblical terms. It was the Israeli president who said that there are no innocents in Gaza. It was the Israeli so-called defense minister or terror minister who said we're going to shut off the medicine and the water and the food, and we're going to starve the people.
Shocking statements. I agree with you.
And that's what they did. They weren't shocking.
I agree with you. And the fact that they were able to do that,
and they're still doing it. Now they want to expand it to Lebanon.
I don't disagree with you about the occupation charge, because clearly only an occupying force or country can have the ability to turn on the tap of energy and water and so on. I agree with you.
So that makes it a criminal regime that your government is backing to the hilt. So what does that make your government? It makes it a terror regime.
Okay.
So instead of calling our governments and groups in this region that are indigenous, and all they want is Palestinians to be treated as equal human beings and to bring down this corrupt system, instead of calling them the terrorists, you should call those people who are the terrorists.
All I would say is I believe all Palestinians should have exactly the same human rights as any Israelis
Everywhere.
or anybody else. I completely believe that.
Everywhere.
Yeah, but I do not agree with your characterization of these groups as resistance. They are terror groups, but we'll have to disagree.
They are heroes, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a hero.
Okay, he's your hero. To me, he was a despicable terrorist, but we will have to leave it there. Professor Marandi, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.